Well, we're out here changing drone batteries. Here's the 6-liter in all of its glory. We put just over 1,000 miles on this 6-liter in the last couple of days. We got our Motec battery tray, cleans things up, K&N filter, stock power steering setup. We got some pretty big street looking tires on this. I don't know what these are, Discoveries. Interstate battery, which we're a fan of. Wet lead acid Megatrons are good batteries. You can see we got some extra stuff on here. S-Pod, I don't know, some relays and things, but overall this Jeep is pretty clean. And I think that's why we netted some pretty good results on the economy. We are back on another 1,000-mile road trip. We are in an early model JK with a L96 6-liter. We have been doing a lot of L96 6-liters lately, and GM discontinued them not long ago, so I went ahead and purchased everything I could find. So we got some in the shop, but once those are gone, they're gone. If you're wondering, yes, we are going the speed limit. You'll notice that speedometer is saying about 65, but it's way off. As you can see here, we're going 75. This 6-liter, and by the way, this Jeep is geared high too. I think you know that a lot of these Jeeps are geared for the V6, and they're not ideal or optimal for the LS or the LT. You really need to gear these things tall, guys. We want to be seeing about just over 2,000 RPM at 70, 75, and if you're spinning it up at 2,600, you're just wasting gas. Well, this JK does have some electrical things like an S-Pod and some other gadgets. It's pretty clean. If you look at the outside of it, there's not light bars and winches and stuff all over. I see he removed his winch. He's probably going to sink it more, would be my guess. He's got some small lights on the side, but that's about it. But compared to some of the last Jeeps that we've driven with 5 or 6 KC daylighters up on top of the roof and winches and just all sorts of stuff hanging out, this one's relatively clean. I'd like to see what the mileage is, although again, it's not going to be optimal with the gearing that it has. So we're going to head up to Salt Lake. It's about twilight right now, and we'll be back. We are leaving beautiful Utah. As you can see, it started to snow this morning, and it's pretty cold out. Of course, this 6-liter L96 really doesn't care. Those are the Wasatch Mountains. It's really a great place if you guys ever get out here. There's a lot of stuff out here. It's east of Salt Lake City. We got Park City, Heber, Midvale, Middale, whatever it is. I did want to mention that I have been doing some tuning on this L96. Really not tuning, just controlling the spark timing, because every vehicle is different. These heavy-duty 6-liter truck engines are designed to haul heavy trucks, so they're very conservative on spark. We can get significant more power and economy and lower emissions by tweaking the tune a little bit. And essentially on these, I just tweaked the spark a little. Now, I found on this one, when I first hit the road, it was knocking, which was kind of unusual. Now, this is a new engine, and then it stopped, and I was able to add some spark to it. So I think there was probably something left over from production, maybe some assembly grease or something that was causing some pre-ignition. But it went away quickly, and then I started to add some spark to it, and the economy's not too bad. I'm not really exactly sure what it is. I think we're hitting the teens. I'll let you know later. When we start talking about the higher performance engines, the higher compression engines, as you know, the LTs are over 11-to-1 compression. The LS3s are in the high 10s. Then spark timing really becomes important. Air intake temperature also has something to do with it, because GM uses the air intake temp to control spark, as well as a lot of other coefficients. So on the higher compression engines like the LS3 and the LT1, you really want to tune that to your vehicle. Now, if you're locked down with an EO, that's kind of a different story, but by adding some spark to it or pulling some spark out of it, I mean, I've had this same engine in 8,000-pound JKs that were turtles. They just had so much stuff on them that they weighed over 8,000 pounds. They have Hutchinson beadlocks, which are extremely heavy wheels with large, thick sidewall tires. And that's a lot different than a lightweight JK with a lower rating tire. So you can maximize your economy, performance, etc. by just doing some light tuning. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, then have somebody else do it. We do offer HP tuners, which is very popular for tuning because it makes tuning pretty much as easy as you can get. Now, tuning isn't easy. You really have to know what you're doing or you can screw things up. I did have a couple of videos a while back on HP tuners, but it really wasn't on how to tune. If you want to tune your vehicle, work with somebody. With today's technology, you can do email tunes, and there's just so many different options. You don't really need to go out and get a full-blown dyno tune and spend a lot of money. You can work with a lot of guys online, and of course we can help you too. But I've had some guys that have added some spark and a little bit of PE and have picked up quite a bit of performance, and also rev limiter. Be careful with the rev limiter though, especially if you have an active fuel management engine, because in most cases you don't want to be spinning that engine up past 6,000 RPM. The early LSs especially, if you wind them up, you're going to crunch the lifter. And the later LTs, seems like they've made a lot of progress with the active fuel management lifters, and they don't seem to be having a whole lot of problems with it. So when you do tuning, do incremental steps. And I'll also tell you this, if you start doing your own tuning and you go outside of the parameters of what is acceptable, you're pretty much going to void your warranty, and there's a higher likelihood of breaking parts. As I've said in my videos for the last 10 years, we try to mimic what the manufacturer does, because the manufacturer has to make these powertrains work in all conditions. Up here in the snow, down where we're going, where temps can reach 120 degrees. They've got to haul heavy loads, they've got to haul light loads. So GM has to tune these to work in all those different environments. So while there are some gains to be had by fine-tuning the calibration to your vehicle, you don't want to go too far. Just because you turn the rev limiter up a little doesn't mean turning it up a lot's going to help, because there's a really good chance you're going to break something. Same thing with spark. You start cranking that spark up and you get too much pre-ignition, you could damage your engine. Because while you might have good spark control with the current fuel you're running, you all of a sudden get down near the border or up here in Utah where the fuel isn't that great, and you could then see some spark knot. There's another thing that guys mess with, and that's called performance enrichment. And we'll talk about torque management later. In fact, I think I'll do a whole video on tuning at some point. I myself am not a tuner. I just tune by experience, because as you know, Motec pretty much delivers stock tunes, stock calibrations. We work with agencies that require that. But if you look at performance enrichment, that's basically when the engine starts to fatten up. The stoichiometric for gasoline is about 14.7 to 1. Most of us are driving around at about 14.1, 14.2, because there's some alcohol in the fuel, and alcohol has a lower stoic point. It's about 9 to 1. So when you put alcohol in the fuel, it lowers that stoic point. But the O2 sensors don't look at the hydrocarbon as much as they look at the oxygen or the O2 content, and then they base stoichiometry on that, especially with a narrowband O2 sensor. We're not talking wideband. And I know I'm rattling a lot of stuff off right now, but you guys can look it up if you want. So what performance enrichment does is it takes you out of stoic or closed loop, and then it puts you into open loop, where you can put any fuel ratio you want in. And 11 to 12 to 1 is what the racers like. Keeps the engine cool, keeps the engine safe. You're not going to lean out and burn a valve. So yes, when you take your engine and you get into it, into the throttle, you're going to see that engine fatten up. You're going to see it go from 14 point whatever to 1 down to 13, 12, maybe even 11 to 1 in some circumstances. Now, while you're going to be using more fuel, you're going to get a lot more power, and that's what the guys are after. But I've had guys put too much PE in, then they're going down the highway under a light load, going up maybe a slight grade, and they kick into PE and they don't know it, and they're dumping fuel into the engine for 50 miles, and they wonder why they're getting 9 miles to the gallon or 8 miles to the gallon. So all these things come into play when you want to start tuning your engine, and things that I think about, and that's why I test drive these. Moral of the story is, if you're just a regular old guy that wants to wheel, have an engine that's reliable with all the protection modes. Remember, we got hot protection, we got misfire detection, we got all sorts of things going on in these engines to keep them safe. And GM has to warranty these engines, so it's win-win. You get an engine that lasts a long time, and GM doesn't have to warranty it. Now you start messing with it. You take torque management out of it, so you're putting more torque out. That could damage the transmission. All you supercharger guys with the 3.8s and 3.6s know that. We've had some of the LT engines just break ARB lockers. That's how powerful they are when torque management is disabled, and that's right off the line. There's axle protection, anti-clunk. So axle protection means that GM doesn't want the drivetrain to be subjected to too much torque, which could damage it. So of course they limit it, especially during gear shifts. So if you start removing all that stuff, putting in some PE, revving the motor up higher, put more spark in, yeah, you're going to definitely get some improvement. I had a guy with a 6-liter not long ago that had a tuner just make the thing like it was for the track. he tuned it so that it felt like a NASCAR. In fact, we used to race super lates out here at the Bull Ring in Las Vegas, and that's what that thing felt like. It was always on the pipe. It felt great, but the guy was getting 7 miles to the gallon. His wife would drive it, so of course we backed it off for him. And you got to just use reason. What do you need? What do you want? What you probably need is what the factory offers. Most of these engines are, well, all of these engines are over 300 horsepower, but many of them are over 400 horsepower. The one I'm driving now is rated about anywhere from 330 to 360. I'd say I'm pushing 375 right now, and it's way more power than I need. I can cruise at 80 miles an hour in this Jeep, no sweat. So if you got more power than you need, why do you want to go out and tweak it more? It's unlikely that you're going to go out there and race Mustangs and Camaros, because they're always going to have an advantage on you. They're going to have lighter weight, smaller tires, better aerodynamics, and all that stuff. But if that's where you're at and you want to go race your Jeep against other Jeeps, then do it. Just know that you're doing it at your own risk, though, because whether it's Motec or General Motors or even Mopar, they're not going to warranty something that's been modded and then subjected to extreme use, as they call it. You guys know we've talked a lot about the 6-liter and how reliable it is in different environmental conditions, and we're going to be going from these snow-covered mountains down to Vegas, where we're going to be probably close to 80 degrees, and 600 handles those climate changes with no problem, as do most of the other engines. But I would have to say that the iron block engines probably handle it just a little bit better. As is typical with the weather around this time of the year up here, we've got some pretty heavy snow and crosswinds, and visibility is down to a couple of 100 feet. Let me tell you something about a couple of things I've learned about driving JKs in the snow, or pretty much any vehicle. One, make sure you have good de-icer. See, even with a defroster on, I'm building up ice, and I've had ice build up on my windshield. I was in a snowstorm in New Mexico where the defroster and the wipers just couldn't keep it clear by itself, and de-icer is required. So keep that. Two, if you have LED lights don't put out the heat that the incandescent light put out, or whatever the manufacturer runs. And I find that those headlights will freeze over, and then you have no headlights. I drove a JK up here a few months ago, and it had LED lights, and I was almost blind in a snowstorm because the lights had fogged over, and I had to keep stopping and clearing the lights off. Make sure you're running a good mix of antifreeze. You don't want the water in the engine to freeze overnight, and it also helps lubricate some of the components. We're back in sunny Las Vegas. This 6-liter did excellent on the trip, and it got pretty good economy. Even though we had short gears and we were spinning 2,500 plus RPM, it still returned over 300 miles in a tank. And that doesn't really surprise me, because this Jeep is pretty clean. It doesn't have stuff hanging off everywhere. You look at guys with these 40s, 1-tons, daylighters, winches, skid plates, 800 pounds of armor, air compressors, and they're looking to get 25 miles to the gallon, and that's just not going to happen. But this Jeep is pretty trim. It's pretty clean. It's got some street tires on it, street type tires, even though I think they're truck tires. I had one 6-liter go south on me that I know of, and that is a guy that went to Moab, and he laid his Jeep on its side, and he left it there for about a half an hour while he went to get help. And then he tried to start the Jeep while it was laying on its side. Obviously the oil had gone into the chambers and it hydrolocked. They put it up on its 4 wheels. The customer took the plugs out, blew the oil out, started the engine, and drove it to Las Vegas. It had a tick. It actually ran pretty good, but it had a slight engine tick. We tore it down, and it had a bent rod. And that was about it. So it shows you how tough the engine is. Even when put under that circumstance, it still got the customer where he wanted to go. We're going to take this 6-liter up to the mountain, and we will see you shortly.